Good morning, everybody. It's Chris here at Blue Rhino Safaris. Old subject, tyres. I was just at the Namako National Park near Springbok, all the way down to the coastal section out at the Groenrivier mouth, and there's a bit of sand that you have to deal with. I had a vehicle with a very heavy trailer in the back, and we had a few issues just to get through the sand. And since that happened, I've been thinking about what we could have done and how we should have done it, and I just reminded myself of what I've already said. So I'm going to do a quick comparison with some new information. So if you've watched this video before, it's not the same old one. There's some new information that I have, and I'm going to compare two tires that I have experience with now. So if you go onto my website and you go to video equipment, vehicle and equipment videos, click on that, then you will have a range of different videos that I've done. Tire deflation, 29 May 2019. So this is 3 years on, and probably about time to do this video again. There's a bit of information that we're going to use from here, so don't walk away from that. On the website I found this errolstyres.co.za Audi calculator, a very useful little tool to help me with calculating my specific sizes of the Audis and all of those things. So what I want to show you first, the Hilux has a 265/60/18 18-inch rims. I've always said I'm not a big fan of 18s, but I haven't tried them, and I'm going to try them in the future. So Hilux 265/60/18s, and on the Land Cruiser, my normal touring vehicle that I did skeleton coast with, 265/70/16s are the tire that I have on there. Now, if you put the sizes in, you say calculate, then it will tell you the difference between the two tires, and you can see it's 0.28% on the speedo. So the OD of the tire, the rolling diameter, is almost exactly the same. So we are literally comparing the same circumference tire with each other on a 16-inch on the Cruiser and 18-inch on the Hilux. So if you want to use this to calculate your own tire sizes, errolstyres.co.za. So when I was at the Skeleton Coast, we did 2 days through the Namib Desert. I didn't get stuck once. I drove into a hole. That doesn't count as being stuck, but I didn't get stuck once, and my tires was very low. The fronts, I went down to 0.5, which gives me a track length of 303 millimeters. And on the rears, if I remember correctly, I was around about 0.9 bar, which will give me a track length of about 350 millimeters. So between 303 and 350 was working for me in the desert with the weight of the Land Cruiser. So you look at the weight divided by the surface will give you the pressure that you have exerted on the surface. And if you compensate for a lighter vehicle, then you can have slightly less because the pressure on the surface is going to be the same. So a Jimny, for example, can have a smaller footprint because the vehicle is lighter. Land Cruiser is heavier, so the footprint needs to be bigger to have the same pressure between the sand and the tire, because that will determine how deep you sit in the sand. So I have as reference, in the sand I did 303 track length in the front and about 350 in the back. So it will give me an average of about 325 millimeters on all four wheels if you calculate it like that. So let's have a look at what I did with the Hilux this morning when I measured my track lengths for different pressures. Alright, so let's get started with this. I think this is a crucial exercise to do, to understand exactly what your tires are doing when you're deflating. And all you need is 2 sheets of white paper, a hard surface, a tire, a book with notes, pressure meter, and a ruler to measure with, and then something to inflate your tire with. So the first thing I do to set it up, this tire is now at 0.5 bar. 0.5 is the lowest pressure that you can use in 4x4 driving, because it will climb off the rim if you go lower than this. So 0.5 is your limit for 4x4 driving. So get your tyre at 0.5, then slide in a sheet of paper on both sides until it touches the wheel, so you can't get it in any deeper. Then line up the front surfaces to make sure that you are square with everything and the paper's angle is not influencing your markings, and then measure the distance. So the distance front to back, my footprint is 378. So at 0.5 bar it is 378. At the same time, if you wanted to, you can just have a look at the level of the height of the profile, just to give you a rough idea, and we have around 90 millimeters. Then I'm starting at the bottom because if I inflate my tire it will go up and it will not pinch the papers. So now I'm going to 0.6. There we go, 0.6. Slide them in. Get them square and measure. 355. That's 0.6. Now 0.7. If I look at this tire, then this is getting into the range that I would want to do a sand with. It's got a nice little bulge, it looks flat enough. 0.7. Now obviously we are talking 0.7 is deep sand issues, Namib Desert, those type of places. 0.7, and I'm at 328, 330, 330. I like at this point, just stick. It's still a lot. Sorry, this was 80. It's still roughly 80 millimeters. Right, up to 0.8. Now if I look at this, then this is to me what I want if I'm doing sand. It feels right. Because sand tires have a lot to do with what it looks like rather than what the actual pressure is. But once you've done this exercise, you can do exactly what the actual pressure should be rather than just using your eyeballs. Okay, so we slide them in, get them square. If you get that paper and that paper lined squarely, then your measurements will be accurate. 305, 0.8, then we go to 0.9, I still like this for a sand tire, so I'm going to put a S at 0.8. That's where I started liking this tire the first time. 0.7, 0.8, somewhere there. Square. 285. 285. 0.9. Right. Here's one more. For me, it's now moving out of shape of sand. If I'm doing soft sand, then this is almost too hard. There's not enough of a buoyancy there. So if I just look at the tire, I would say this is the upper limit, 270. Then we go to 1.1. Right, so you get the drift. For me, as I said in the video, around about 0.7, I was happy with the sand tire, 0.8, and I said when I got to about 1 bar, I wasn't happy with what it looked like anymore, and this is what I had, 277. Now what I did was, on the Land Cruiser tire, I drew the data from that side, and I punched it in here, and I've got two graphs on the same page that will give us a very interesting bit of reading. So the blue line is the Hilux, and what to me is interesting, an 18-inch tire at very soft pressures have given me lower or bigger track, bigger footprint than the 16-inch, which is a surprise to me. I thought it would be different than that, but there it is. It's in the graph, and you can see what it looks like. So what I said was, with my Land Cruiser, these are both the front tires. I'm just comparing front tires because the nose of the vehicle doesn't see a different weight if you load the vehicle in the back. Now, ideally, once you have loaded your vehicle ready to go on holiday, after it's loaded and it's full, then you do this exercise with your rear tires, and you can find exactly the track length for the rear tires under load, and it will be different from the front. And then you can start playing around. So remember I said I had 380 or 0.5 bar on the Cruiser. That was 303. Now if I go down the list here to 300, that gives me a 0.9 bar. But I said that the average was more or less 325. So if I go to 325 on the Hilux, I'm sitting at between 0.7 and 0.8 bar. And that's what I said when I looked at the tire. I said, this looks right. This looks like the tire that I would want if I was driving in sand. So a comparison here would say that if I was happy with my Land Cruiser's front tires at 300 millimeters track length, so they gave me good grip at half a bar, and it gave me 303. Then if I carry that over to the Hilux, then it would be at 0.9. So if I go back to the Namib Desert, I'm not going to deflate to 0.5 because it's a little bit too soft for me. I'm going to do what I think my eyeballs are happy with. That was from 0.7. And to get to the same as the Land Cruiser, it would be at 0.9. But that's my range, 0.7 to 0.9. That's what I'm talking about. Now, if I'm driving in soft sand and it's hot in the day, my tire pressure will go up by 0.4 bar. 0.4 just on temperature, and if I add 0.4 to this, I get to 1.2, and that's 255 millimeters. I'm going to get stuck because that doesn't work for me. On the Land Cruiser, 255 would have been 1.1 in the front, and I know I can't drive with the Land Cruiser at 1.1 in the front. It is just too soft on my vehicle to do that. So it's a very interesting comparison, this, and as I said, this is the range for the Hilux. On the 18-inch, 265/60, I don't have a winch, I don't have a bull bar, it's a 2.8 turbo diesel. That's the only weight that's on the vehicle on the front, and I was happy with 0.7, 0.8 thereabout, and that gives me the 325, which tells me if I go back to sand in future, I can print this little graph out and I can keep it in the cabel, and when I stop there, remember it changes for every tire. So if I go from Goodyear to Goodrich to Dulers, it will be different for all of them. So you have to measure it when you change your tires, when you change the weight of the vehicle. Then you need to do this exercise again and just capture the information so that you know what to do. But if I was happy with 303 on the front, then I will go to my Bucky. I would look for a 303 at 0.9, so my go-to would be between 0.8 and 0.9. That's immediately my go-to. The weights, two big diesel engines on a vehicle, roughly the same on the tire, 265. The width of the tire is the same, so I want the same footprint, so I can just copy this. So there I go. So if I go to the sand, and that vehicle that we had that had problems towing the trailer, I would immediately say to them, let's go to 0.8. If you have your chart, let's go to 0.8 because it will give me, or 0.7, 0.8, it will give me a 325. track length, and I'm looking for a 265 by 325. That will give me the right square to do the sand, because I just drove through with my Land Cruiser, and if my Land Cruiser can do it at 303, then your vehicle can also do it at 303, because they sit equally deep in the sand. The fact that you're towing a trailer means you have more traction, so you actually have to add the trailer weight to the vehicle. So if you have a 2-ton Hilux and you have a 1.5-ton trailer, then it's a 3.5-ton beast that you actually have, that you have to think about, because your torque is going to have to move that weight through the sand. So you have to remember that the weight plays a massive role that you're pulling, because your footprint is the same, but your traction, your torque is going to be very high to get that through. So that Hilux with the trailer probably more represents a very heavy Hilux, a very heavy Land Cruiser, and you would then have to go lower in pressure, just to make sure that your footprint is bigger so that you have the traction to go. A lot of technical stuff, but that's it. So here's an interesting thing. There's a crossover point where the Land Cruiser, the profile is or the track length is different, and it goes in the opposite direction. So I've always said this first section doesn't really play a role. If you look at this from about 1.6 that way, it doesn't really play a role in 4x4 conditions, but everything happens on the low side, and it's a very interesting graph, this. So do this at home. Compare your front tire or deflate your tires. Use the pieces of paper and the ruler or a tape measure. Check your pressures. It takes you half an hour to do this once, and once you've got it, you've written down everything, you can keep that for your own record. And if you know that you've driven through the Savuti sand and your tire pressures were, when you measure it, when you're driving, not in the morning when you had your coffee, but when you were actually driving the obstacle, what was the pressure? The pressure was 1 and I didn't get stuck. You know that on your vehicle, 277 as a track length is good for Savuti sand. So whatever you do in future, you have a different vehicle, different tire. You can always go there first and say, let's start with 277 because I know that worked in the Hilux, and you ignore the pressures. You look just at what the track gives you. So I know in my experience, if I'm looking at a tire and I think a tire is good, then I'm talking on the Hilux, I said 0.7, 0.8 thereabout. That gives me 325. I said on the Land Cruiser, when I had 325 average, I was doing well in the desert, 325. So I know for me, personally, I prefer a 325 track length, roughly. So whatever vehicle I drive, I'm going to deflate to get roughly 325 in soft sand. And on this tire, on this Hilux, it's between 0.7, 0.8 in the front. And then I have to do the same exercise for the back, and I go and look for that number again, and that will give me exactly what I need. So I hope this is interesting. It's a little bit of an eye-opener. I was scared of the 18 inches, but I'm actually not too scared now. If I look at the information here, what it means is 1.2 bar is too hard. It's going to give me 255. That's way too hard. That's this much track that you lose. 1.1, same story. So the big influencers on your track length is your tire pressure, which is connected to your tire temperature. The warmer the tire, the more inflated it is. So check it when you are doing the obstacle. Check your tire pressure. The second thing is your gauge. If you have a bad tire pressure gauge, you can see if your pressure gauge is measuring 0.8, but it's actually 1. The one is getting stuck and the other one is fine. I have had pressure gauge differences on my trips of 0.4 bar from this side to that side if we test all of them. So make sure that you find a pressure gauge somewhere and calibrate your pressure gauge to make sure that it is correct. And if it's not, find on your pressure gauge what gives you the 325 And if you have that, then you know on this pressure gauge, if I read this, then I have the exact right numbers. So if you're on a trip with me in future and we are doing sand, then I would actually think you would have this little sheet in your vehicle for those tires, for the load on your vehicle as you come on my trip. Because then you can just look at this and say, oh, when I go at this pressure, I get that track length, and theoretically that is the right number. So yeah, it just makes the whole sand thing a little bit more scientific rather than just thumbsuck eyeball. The sun is shining, the wind is blowing from the east, and now we're getting stuck. Those things are a little bit iffy, but this is a little bit more scientific. So I trust you enjoyed it. Go do this exercise for your own vehicle. If you have a different tire than mine, but the same type of vehicle, you're welcome to send your results through to me so that I can just check. I'm always curious to see what the spectrum is like. I always ask about fuel consumption because it tells me what the different vehicles, the different engines with the different loads at different speeds are doing. So in my mind, I have a good understanding of fuel consumption of all vehicles that travel with me. But it would also be nice to see what other vehicles' pressures are arrived at if you do this exercise. So if you're happy to share it with me, you're welcome to email it to me, and I can have a look at it and give you an opinion. Do it on the front, do it on the back, and I'll tell you, for sand, I would say XYZ. But there you have it. I don't have to say it again. It's about 325, 330 millimeters is the track length on my vehicle on a 265 that I'm looking for. Otherwise, if you have questions, let me know. Have a great weekend. I'll chat to you again. Cheers.